Hello, everybody, and welcome to an Extra Shift special. This is the Chris self-indulgent podcast. I've sidelined Brendan for a moment. He'll be back a bit later today, though. I am here, however, to talk about my passion, which is the San Jose Sharks and other things. And I'm here with Ian and Felix, of course, from Teal, USA. How are we, gentlemen?
Good. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to this. Really am.
This should be good.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Happy to be here. I'm hoping that we can have a good show here. I'm excited.
This should be really good. So I've been looking forward to this because normally, as a Sharks fan, and I mean, and you know this being in Canada as well, like being a Sharks fan in first of all, Australia's a market where there's not really any teams,
right?
But being a Sharks fan in a market where most people don't know much about the Sharks and just they're that team over there, aren't they? That one over there, Joe Thornton, that guy, yeah. It's nice to talk to other people who know who we are. This is good. This is a really nice thing. So I wanted to get into it, especially just wanted to get straight into it because, you know, what a season. What an amazing season.
I'll start with you. Putting it.
Yeah, I'll start with you. And have you seen a season quite like it?
Sure. Yeah. Unfortunately, I am old enough to remember the expansion. So I remember the first two seasons of San Jose Sharks hockey, and they were not fun. San Jose obviously didn't get the deal that Seattle and Vegas got. And, you know, San Jose is in a long list of expansion teams that had to come in the hard way. I don't begrudge Vegas and Seattle because I think it was a broken, dumb system. So I'm glad that they've changed it to make it have teams be a little more competitive out of the gate, especially with what teams go for now. I mean, $500 million for the Golden Knights and $600 million or $650 million for the Seattle Kraken. So I mean, if you're going to spend that kind of money, you should have a fighting chance out of the gate. So I approve it. Yeah, I've seen some stuff beyond this year.
Felix, how about you? How has this gone for you?
So this is my first time being cheering for a team that's gone this bad. It's been obviously it was a trying season, and as we're gonna talk about, it's not gonna get any better soon. But yeah, this is my first go around seeing a team that's kind of on the downtrend, so to speak, and floundering, we'll say.
much like Ian, I was very young when I caught my first sort of NHL, but it was the Sharks' inaugural season was the first thing I saw, and I was like, "Yay, What do you mean they're not good?" That's really, and it was not good.
Yeah.
And you know, then it was like, oh well, that's okay. And then they suddenly got really good for a very long period of time. You know, as my beloved co-host Brendan, who's a Penguins fan, will remind me frequently that, you know, in that long run, the Sharks had the most wins out of any team that didn't walk away with a cup, which makes me feel great. And especially since we've also relived that Stanley Cup playoffs between the two of us a few times, and that goes really well. It's a great memory. It's a wonderful memories there.
That's rough. I mean, yeah, if your co-host being a Penguins fan, that's rough because
it's like they had
one series obviously being different conferences, and to have that be the only
that
hurts.
And when you got to go, so it would have been good, but Logan got hurt, and it was done after that. It's not a great memory there. And, you know, when they were having their bit of the bumpy start to the season the Penguins had, and Brandon's like, you know, they're not particularly great at the moment. I'm like, yeah, that must be terrible. Don't know how you're coping with all of that struggle that you've got right now. You know, how's Sid? How's Evgeny? They're good?
Mm-hmm.
How are the Cups? So this season, though, San Jose couldn't be further away from a trophy if they wanted to be. So I'll start with you, Ian. It's got a general perception, and not just saying crappy. What do we make of Mike Greer's Sharks?
I think that it's really hard to say right now. I've said this a lot this year, that really we're not going to have a good idea of what Mike Greer has done for a couple of years when we see how some of these moves he's made play out. I think it's been a mixed bag so far. I think that there's been some things that I've really liked. I think that he's done a good job of trying to address needs that the team has. I think the team defensively, especially on the prospect end, was very barren, and I think he's done moves to try and address that. Now, they still need the guy on defense, but I think he's done a good job of backfilling with potential prospects in the defensive pool. I think that trades for the most part have been more good than bad. I don't like the Brent Burns trade. I think that one's gonna age very poorly with Iku Makaniemi being a Group 6 unrestricted free agent this year, so he's probably not coming back. I doubt he got qualified, even if he did, just because of the injury problems that he had. So I think trades have been, I think it's been a bit of a mixed bag. But again, like, we know where the team is at. We knew what the team had to do. I think he did a good job of clearing contracts, clearing salary to kind of get this team to where it kind of needs to be. You have two big contracts still on the books. You have Marc-Edouard Vlasic, which I don't think anyone's touching.
That's the end of time.
Yeah, and then you have Logan Couture, who obviously, when he's healthy, he's great. But will he ever be healthy again? I don't know. So it's, I think given that, like, I think everything else that he could possibly have moved, he's moved, and I think he's done a good job of doing that.
So in terms of that, for you, Felix, in terms of, like, as Ian was just saying there, in terms of what Mike's had to do to rebuild, how do you think that's gone?
Yeah, I think he's, again, to echo Ian, he's done what he could, and I think we're kind of, I suppose, in the early stages of this, and we're seeing essentially what this team, obviously we know what this team is, and I just to echo, I think Ian said it was on point that we're kind of seeing a mixed bag of what the Sharks are, and it's for this season, and it's just it's this is what the Sharks are, basically. That's the best way to put it.
Well, it's like in the preseason, our preseason predictions for the podcast, I had us absolutely dead last, and way dead last. And in the group, in the Australian NHL fans Facebook page, we have, after every Sharks win, I was posting, if you've seen the meme, you just lost to Mike Greer's San Jose Sharks.
Yeah.
And the deal was, I had a couple of people push back and go, "Oh, why are you bragging?" And I went, "We don't win that much. I'll tell you what, I'll stop using the meme after we get to 20 wins." Knowing full well that I was never going to have to stop using the meme.
Never going to get there.
It was never going to get close to that. People are like, "Oh, you've won a couple in a row. It's not funny anymore." I'm like, no, it's hilarious. We're not clearing 20 wins. For me, I think a couple of podcasts ago, it was after the trade deadline, I had a bit of a long-winded rant about what the vision was. And my concern came out of the Hurdle trade. Sure. And what I thought the return was on the Hurdle trade, and I got it. It was one of those ones where I got why the return was what it was, but at the same time felt like they sort of maybe fleeced themselves as well. And it was one of the Hurdle one is still a weird one. I go back and forth on it all the time because I'm like, I understand why the market value was there, but I also feel like if you made that decision that you were going to do that early enough, you probably could have got a little bit more for him from a few people, especially since you knew that Vegas was going to have to move heaven and hell to make that all stick.
It's something they always do.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they do, but that's the thing. Look, I've, as much as it kills me to say this, because Vegas and hate Vegas, but the fact that Vegas has worked the rules the way they've worked the rules is genius. And I look at it, go to the rest of the league, when they all complain, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I think I mentioned the other day again, one of my favorite stats, which is when everyone starts on Vegas is so far over the cap, I'm like, do you know which team is the furthest over the cap right now? It's the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yep.
They're just not doing it properly. Like, do it properly. If you're going to be the team that's the furthest over the cap, do it properly and win something. But it's, for me, I was worried about that return. But then in the last couple of weeks as well, one of the underrated things I think with Greer that I wasn't expecting is his work on the unrestricted free agents coming out of college.
Yeah.
Like the Colin Graff signing in particular. Like that's really good, really tidy business.
Yeah,
So,
I thought, and Henry Thrun was like the trade for Henry Thrun and getting that done. Brilliant. Yep.
Like, and this is what makes him so hard. And you said we a lot of this is very much because there's a lot of youth. It's wait and see what this becomes.
Yeah.
But that's the really tricky part in what is a very reactionary NHL is where does this sort of meander towards and what do you add? And I think that's the next big question we've got is we'll leave the draft lottery to one side for a minute because we can't control lotteries.
100%.
But we've got a lot of players coming off the books this year. It's what do you add to give you a bit of experience and leadership to help the players out, but at the same time, not hamstringing yourself for 3-4 years down the line when you're actually going to plan to be a bit decent. So what are they looking for, do you think?
I think you're just looking for guys that can kind of be a patchwork of guys that they can use until they get more guys coming up, right? Like again, like the rebuild, the Sharks have been bad for 5 years, but the rebuild only started 2 years ago. So I think guys
it never officially started because they wouldn't use the word.
Well, but it wasn't even there. Like they before Mike Greer was even hired, they extended Tomas Hertl.
Yeah, well,
right. Like in a team that's in a rebuild doesn't extend.
Yep.
Doesn't extend Tomas Hertl.
Don't give those contracts out.
Yeah, like they weren't. I know they never used the word, and they kind of, Doug Wilson always kind of said, "Oh well, we're a lot closer than people think," and stuff like that. But it wasn't until Mike Greer came in that like the rebuild actually started. Like, yeah, they flipped some pieces for picks and stuff, but they weren't actively trying to get bad. You still had Erik Karlsson on the book. You still had Brent Burns on the books. You had Timo Meier on the books. Like all the guys that are unfortunately gone now, they were all on the books until Mike Greer came in and moved them all out the door.
And just off the back of that as well, just quickly, the other thing with the organization, and we'll talk a little bit about the end of Doug's tenure in a minute, but the fact that they allowed that Hertl extension with Joe Will, but the fact that it was Joe Will, like it wasn't even a permanent general manager, and it's like you sign him to this long contract that's going to like that was baffling to me.
It's a failure of ownership, in my opinion. Because there was no direction, right? Like they didn't have a set direction until Mike Greer came in and said, this is what we're doing. And so to allow an interim general manager to make that kind of a decision and then 180 as soon as Mike Greer is signed it's a failure of ownership. I'm never super hard on Sharks ownership because I think that Hasso Plattner pays the bills. He's quiet. He's not overly meddling.
Yeah.
Sometimes
he's not a Eugene
metal though. Like sometimes you need to meddle, right? And I think that he was just like sometimes I feel like he's too hands off on the hockey ops, especially in a situation like that. Like because ultimately you can say Joe Will did it, but like who signed the check? Hasso Plattner signed the check.
Well, that goes back down to there was that whole conversation around were the Sharks prepared to use that word because of attendances, and that was that whole argument of, but they want people in SAP. And, to get people in SAP, you don't tell everyone that you're going to be bad.
It's hard, right? Because the NHL, like, I think something we'll talk about later, but like this is a gate-driven league still, right? This is how you make your money. You make a lot of your money at the gate, especially the Sharks. Sharks TV deal isn't very good. The regional deal isn't very good. So you make a lot of your money at the gate. So yeah, it is hard. The problem is that if you're a guy, like my take has always been if you make business decisions instead of hockey decisions, the hockey's going to suffer. If you make the hockey decisions, the business things will sort themselves out.
Yeah. It's not to give an overboard example of that, but it's Harold Ballard. I'm making a lot of business decisions. Yeah, but the product on the ice stinks. Yes, but look at this. Right. Maple Leaf Gardens is wonderful. But it's like, so in terms of just from your view then, Felix, in terms of how this sort of looks, what do you think they're looking at moving forward? What would you want to see them focus on?
Like Honestly, I want to see. I know this is. I. By the way, just a note. I generally give pretty like generic answers when it comes to this, but
Yeah, but
because
they're good.
but
They're worth it at this point because it's about time.
but I just want to see a fucking competitive team. Like honestly, like I just want to see a good on ice product that people can actually watch on a nightly basis and be like, okay, this is, even though the Sharks are not great right now, this is a team that I can, take pride in saying like, okay, this is actually a pretty good team that, and not like not like on a nightly basis, just like, how was it like last night or something? Like they were getting blown out by
Yeah.
Calgary and then getting blown out by Edmonton. Like, you know what I mean? Like the last thing you want is a team that gets just utterly destroyed.
You
Like,
can be both. That's the thing. You can be both. Like, I know the Dangle podcast frequently talk about, the Leafs when they were 07 and fun, as they put it.
Yep.
And that was the thing. And like with the Sharks this year, in large patches this year, I've really enjoyed games where we've raced out to a lead and then just coughed it up at the end. So we don't have the points, but we've had some really good hockey in the middle of there. We've looked decent, and then we've just choked it away at the end. And I can go, well, thank you very much. There's no points. That's great. That's what we wanted. But I got to watch some scoring, and I've frequently, as we got to the end of the season, when I was posting that meme when we were winning games, I was posting it out of absolute disgust. And I was when we beat St. Louis again, because that's all we did this year. I posted it up and went, St. Louis, seriously, what the hell? I'm posting this meme out of protest. I don't want to be posting this. I wanted you to get the points. I wanted us to play well, but I wanted you to win because I kind of want that pick. It's that balance between being entertaining, but also finding yourself in draft position, and it's a really.
It's really, it's sort of like a I don't know if a double-edged sword is appropriate here, but like it's really, you have to like carefully curate that balance. And
it's funny, right? Because like what I do at Teal Town USA, a lot of what I do is post game content.
Yes.
Like we go on live after every game.
Yep.
And it was like I really struggled at the start of the year trying to figure out how we're going to do this, because like I didn't think the team was very good on paper. I thought like, and you don't want wins, right? But it's like I don't want to like come on and just be like cheering for losses. Like I think losses
blowout
are
period. That early blowout period was
like it's like you want to like but you can't go on and be angry about it either, because like
right,
you're again, right? Like what the team is. You can't be like they lost 10-0 and I'm super mad, and like you can't.
No, of course that team lost 10-0. Should have been more. Mackenzie Blackwood was on fire that night.
And the thing is, you can only be mad at them for so long before it just gets like freaking like.
Well, then you're just like being a character of yourself.
But that's literally that other point, though, as you said, like that thumping phase where we got absolutely smashed early in the season before we then came out, won our first game, and in the funniest win of the season, beat the Oilers. But in that little run, Mackenzie Blackwood was absolutely outstanding, and they were getting thumped. But he was making all sorts of saves, and he was the only reason we weren't like getting even higher scores against us, because like Blackwood was on fire, and like everyone in the league was even going, the Sharks are terrible, but man, Mackenzie Blackwood. And that's the weirdest thing you can say about a team that's getting done by double digits is that the goalie was superb.
I mean that I think that the one, if you want to take a positive away from this season, this is the first season in a long time where goaltending wasn't an issue, in my opinion.
No.
Like I know like Magnus Corona had to get put in some games that he probably shouldn't have been in, and that wasn't good. And I know Devin Cooley got pretty badly lit up at the end of the season. But if you're looking at like your NHL goaltending, like guys that are going to be on the team next year going forward, guys that are going to eat up a lot of minutes, like Mackenzie Blackwood and Kaapo Kähkönen when he was for Kaapo Kähkönen had a great season, like a huge redemption arc from the season prior. It was nice that goaltending was kind of like the one bright spot, and I'm hoping that's because of the additions of guys like Ryan Miller and Thomas Spear, who came in to help with getting Nabokov with the goaltending. And the Barracuda goaltending was kind of a similar thing on the Barracuda. I didn't think with the Barracuda I don't think goaltending was the story there either.
No, I think Barracuda have bigger issues. But But I thought, yeah, I agree. Like, because the last couple of seasons in particular, the goaltending's been like, we had a period of fairly good goaltending, and then in the last few seasons, after Martin Jones forgot what he was doing, we had this like, and that was the other day when I was watching the Leafs game to see if Matthews could get 70, and I'm watching Martin Jones going, I remember you.
Yeah.
This is the Martin I remember from the end of that run. You couldn't stop a beach ball. But and no puck control, puck control, and a 5-hole, the size of the Grand Canyon. But it's just the goaltending was very solid. I'm not worried about the Devin Cooley stuff at the end of the year. I think, first of all, if anyone's going to shrug it off, it's Devin Cooley.
Devin Cooley, 100%.
But secondly, I think it's probably also good. He's got that a bit of NHL experience with him. He's got the positives and the negatives. So you're not worried about, well, when's the negative going to happen? He's sort of seen both sides of it now. So
yeah, I just don't know if there's any room for him next year. Like, he's a UFA. So I don't know if there's any room next year for Devin Cooley. If he came back and he was like on the Barracuda, like as like the third veteran guy, I don't hate that. Yeah. But with Vanacek and Blackwood already under contract, you have Krona and Romanov under contract with the Barracuda. They brought in the Vermont goalie Gabriel Carrier, I believe is his name.
Yeah,
he's on an AHL deal next year. So I don't know where the room is for him.
It might be a case if you try to bring him back, send him to the Barracuda, and then you've got trade options if you need to as you get close to the deadline, where you can probably, more than likely to be Blackwood that you'd flip towards the deadline because someone's going to want him. The injury for Mackenzie Blackwood this year happened at the absolute worst time. As they're hitting deadline, and you got the feeling that teams were sniffing around him, and the injury happens. You're like, well, there goes that. Because I think there are one or two playoff teams who definitely would have taken a swing at Mackenzie Blackwood. Probably the team that's way over the cap right now, but we'll talk about it. So in terms of like players coming in, like I think for me, obviously you want that guy in defense because, as much as Pickles has been a great servant, I've spent the last 5 seasons trying to trade him.
As have we all.
every time there's been a running joke on the podcast now for about 5 years, which has been every time a team is trading for a defenseman, I'm like, you could have a shiny Mark-Ed Vlasic. And every time I tried to work him into every trade we could, knowing full well that there is nobody on the planet taking that contract. The Habs a couple of years ago were probably our best bet, and then we didn't do that. And it's not happening now. But I kind of also want to see some experience at center just to sort of give everyone a bit of a break and give everyone a chance to develop. I never thought I'd want to see like an Adam Henrique, for example. I never thought I'd want to see Adam Henrique. I've talked myself into the idea of that's not a bad option. To just
a guy that I would like them to bring in is a guy like David Perron, and that as a Sharks fan, like that feels filthy.
Yeah, it does.
Right. It does. But he's a guy who I think could come in, and I think he could, I think he could play quality minutes, and I think he could provide something for the kids that he would play with. I don't know if he's. I feel like Detroit's probably going to want to bring him back, but if he does end up hitting the market in free agency, he's a guy that I'd like to bring. A lot of people last night when we were doing our show talked about bringing a guy like Alec Martinez in on the D line.
I saw that.
I think, I don't hate that idea either, right? Like just guys who have been there, done that can come in and have like a positive impact on the kids, because that's what matters next year. It's going to be.
You've got a couple of those guys. There's an Alec Martinez. There's, as much as I don't really rate him that highly anymore, Tyler Myers is around.
Sure.
You've also got like Tyson Barry's up as well.
Barry, yeah.
Look, Tyson Barry, given that his strength is power play, that could be something.
Because Kalen Addison needs to be fired into the sun at this point.
Yeah. There's a couple of fired into the Suns. One of the reasons why I like your analysis so much, Ian, is you, like me, like firing a lot of people into the sun. I'm very much a fan of it.
He's an angry Canadian for a reason.
I'm really not that angry though. Like
no, but it's look, there's been a lot of like decent. There's been some decent stories on the Sharks this year. There's been some misses as well. I know that we've got slightly different views on this. I've always been a fan of Zadina, but it hasn't worked. I don't know what we do. Sad. I think if we had and we'll talk about David Quinn shortly, but I
Sure.
think if there was somebody other than Quinn, I think you'd bring Zadina back 100% because I think it would probably suit somebody else. I don't think under Quinn you're going to see anything from Zadina. That's my concern.
Fair.
I've always sort of liked Zadina, and I'm like, I still can't quite understand why no one can unlock that. Like, because all the promise and all the prospects, when he was coming into the league, I'd done a lot of stuff on that draft class and a lot of stuff on him in particular. And I was very high on Philip Zadina. I wanted the Sharks to draft Zadina. And yeah, I don't know what's happened. It doesn't make any sense to me.
It's just sometimes it just doesn't translate. Like it just all the tools, and sometimes they just don't translate for whatever reason.
So who's been sort of your, apart league goaltending to one side, who's sort of your good story that you'd look at on the Sharks if you had to pick one player and go, that's actually been quietly a good story?
Oh, it's Zetterlund. Zetterlund, 100%. A guy who came in, when the Timo Meier trade went down, Devils fans, were like, oh man, you're going to love this guy. You're going to love this guy. And at the end of last season, I'm like, why should I love this guy? Like, I'm not seeing it. Right. And this season, not only was he the only guy who avoided the injury bug all year.
Yeah.
He had a great season, and like, I'm like, okay, Devils fans, I get it now. I get what you were talking about, because now I love this guy too. Him, and I think Eklund, had a really good season. I think he got some pelters during the mid-season, and justifiably so, I think. But I thought he came back. He had a really strong season. I think if you look at like the numbers that he put up compared to the numbers Timo Meier put up on a very much better team with a little bit more ice time, obviously, but like they're really good. Like if you do the comparison of numbers, they're really good for Eklund. And Mikael Granlund came in as a guy who I thought, this is a cap dump. Like this is the guy that Pittsburgh has to send us to make the cap work. And he was great. Like I completely changed my opinion on Mikael Granlund this year. Like he went from being cap throw in to this is one of my favorite players on the team.
Well, having a co-host who's a Penguins fan, when the Granlund thing happened, he's like, oh, you're not gonna like that. You're not gonna like that at all. That's 100% a cap dump. And I was in 100% agreement. And then as the season went on, I got to the point I picked him up in fantasy because I was desperate for some depth scoring in fantasy, and I was like, and he performed. Yeah, and it was. For me, Granlund was the most unexpected thing this season. Like, there were other bits and pieces where I was like, I could see Zetterlund sort of maybe after he settles in, coming good. Granlund, I'm like, we know what's there and there's not much. And
right. I was very much of that opinion.
It was also the effort. When we were getting blown out early in early games and stuff like that, it was the effort. He was just trying, and you're like, this guy's just not quitting. So the effort, and again, the injury bug hits, and that sort of slows him a bit. But I was super impressed. What about you, Felix? Anyone that stood out for you?
Yeah, no, Granlund, honestly, he was like the first one that popped up in my mind. I was like Granlund was the guy who as Ian pointed out, cap dump, and everyone else was like, I don't think this guy is going to be very good for the Sharks, and and then a couple of games later, he's like, well, you're wrong. So like,
it was weird.
And so Granlund, it did his thing. He, he gives the effort. He, obviously he can snipe. He can, he's got the numbers to show for it. And it's just like, this guy's really, this guy's good, and it's so, no, Granlund definitely. Other positives, again, I would also echo Zetterlund and Eklund. I think these, if you're looking for positives for the future, I think these two are it. And I really liked what I've seen from both of them this season. So
who else I'd also mention?
Yeah,
Thomas Bordeleau.
Yep,
true.
Bordeleau is a guy who started the season on the Sharks. I don't think he was very good. He got sent to the Barracuda, where I don't think he was very good to start. But once he found his stride, and despite, again, injury bug being a thing, I really liked the way his game rounded into shape by the end of the season. I thought When he got up to the NHL, he was playing his best hockey, even better than anything I've seen him do on the Barracuda. So I think Thomas Bordeleau deserves a positive there too.
Yeah, I was really worried early on
Really
in the
great.
season with Bordelot when he went down, and then I'm like, oh well, he'll get his form back in the Barra. What do you mean? That's not good. Okay, and then he came back.
Yeah,
I'm like, he's come back because someone's got to come back, and then he settled in quite nicely. Now, in terms of heading towards the off season, we've got some UFAs and some RFAs. Now the first question I need to ask is aeroplane versus rocket strapped to the sun. Which one are we giving to Mike Hoffman and which one are we giving to Kevin Labanc? I feel like we're probably going to send Labanc into the sun and Hoffman can have the plane flight. It feels harsh to say, but I don't know. The Kevin Labanc thing's just been done. It's been tried. We gave him another go at it. We're done, aren't we?
I'll let you go first, Felix.
Yeah, as much as I like Olympic, I firing into this. I get where you're coming from. Like essentially, firing into the sun at this point. But I feel like he's what's between fire him into the sun and like airplane back. That's basically what I choose. But
SpaceX flight just to the outer atmosphere.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll give him that then.
It's a nice view. It's a nice view.
Yeah, for sure. I'll give him that. I think he's had plenty of chances. It's just for some reason he just hasn't been able to put it together, and it's frustrating. And it's Ian would speak to this better, but I think he's had a lot of chances, and granted, some of it maybe on coaching as well. But it's like at some point, the ship should have sailed a long time ago.
Just quickly,
mm-hmm.
my thing on Labanc is, I think after all the fallout from Evander Kane, I think Kevin Labanc was the biggest victim of all of that. I think his career's never been the same since all of that stuff happened. He seemed to be the one player who got the most unsettled, and it never quite came back.
Really, I never thought about that. That's really interesting. My take, I don't know if either guy would like. I guess Hoffman would be the guy I would fire into the sun. Labanc is gone, right? Like, there's just no way he's coming back.
I'm still amazed that we got both parts of the Hoffman and Carlson. I'm still staggered that we did that.
The thing with Kevin Labanc is that this is, I think, a situation where I think Mike Grier has failed. This is a guy who had been in the doghouse of like the last three coaches on this team. He had found his way into the doghouse multiple times with the three coaches. The second there was any sign of him going into doghouse with David Quinn, that's when you move him, because he would have had a lot more value than he does now. This is a guy who, this is an asset that I think just rotted on the vine, unfortunately.
I don't know. I'm still staggered as to why he wasn't moved, and that's like it
was a big contract. Like, it is a big contract for a guy who's done so little.
I mean, a lot of that probably has to do with our lack of retention space, because
for sure, 100%,
because we've cleaned up a lot of the end of the Doug Wilson era, and that's we're paying the piper now for Doug's generous contracts at the end of that.
100%, but
being a nice guy.
But on that point though, like, that's the league. That was the business the league took when those contracts were signed. That's what people were getting. If you like, I know it sucks because you're like, oh well, these contracts really didn't age well and the team fell off a cliff, and it sucks.
I still don't hate the Carlson one.
Same.
Yeah, I think it was fine. I think I will maintain. I don't have a problem with the Erik Karlsson contract. I think it was worth what we signed. I think everything was there. Everything else fell off. And
here's the thing, right? Like, Shark fans are mad because the team fell off a cliff, and I get it. But what happens if we don't sign any of those contracts and we don't keep any of those guys, and those guys want max deals, and San Jose and Doug Wilson puts his line in the sand and then doesn't pay for them? What are we saying today? Today we'd be saying, well, Hasso Plattner just wouldn't spend the money, and we all hate Hasso Plattner because he wouldn't spend.
We drove the wheels off it to try to get that cup. And
exactly. Like I don't hate the fact that they signed the contracts and they tried to win. Like that's what you should be doing. You should be trying to win. It sucks that it didn't work out. But if we don't sign those contracts to just put a line in the sand and be like, oh well, we're not doing max deals here in San Jose, then those players go somewhere else. And then what are we saying? Like
Pittsburgh can talk about the fact they've had a bit of a down season this year, but every Pittsburgh fan knows what they were doing.
Yeah.
Which is drive it until as long as you've got Sidney Crosby in your lineup and you've got those players there and you've got Evgeny Malkin, you are driving that until the wheels fall off it.
100%.
And that's what you do. And then you go to your rebuild after that.
100%.
The only one that I would, so again, the Joe Will re-signing hurdle, I've got a problem with because that didn't need to happen.
It didn't make sense.
And the Pickles one, that didn't make sense to me at the time either. I thought that $7 million for Vlasic at that point was, and with it, and again, it's the fact that so many no moves and no trades were handed out alongside.
But again, that's the bit. That was the way all contracts are being signed at the time.
Exactly.
The thing with Marc-Edouard Vlasic, like I don't care. Like I know it's my worst take, but like when that contract was signed, I thought that one was good. Like Marc-Edouard Vlasic's contract was the one that was going to age the best. That's what I honestly believed at the time, because he's not overly physical. He's a stick first defenseman, so like there's not like I thought Brent Burns was going to fall apart by this point with the way.
Well, the Burns one would have aged better if we hadn't gone out and got Carlson, because you had two players for the same thing.
Yeah, that too. But I think like the because of the style of hockey that Brent Burns plays, I thought like his body was going to break down way differently than this Vlasic thing played out, right? Like I don't care that it was like the worst take I've ever had, but I thought that was going to be the contract of all of them that was going to age the best, and it was the opposite.
I mean, the thing is, sorry, I was going to say, the thing is, I think very few of us, saw Vlasic falling off a cliff this early.
No, it was almost the second the ink dried.
Yeah, and it's weird because he was on such a good, like, but he was so good on that contract. Like when he was making, like, I think it was $4 million or something. Like it was the best contract in the league, really. And like
5 or something like that. Yeah.
Again, like I just he had to get paid. He was underpaid for such a long time. It just sucks that everything just kind of fell off a cliff with him, because I like Marc-Edouard Vlasic. Like
that's the thing. It's one of those problems where the fan base, and I don't think you'll find anyone in the fan base who hates him. Everyone just looks at that contract and just goes, "Oh, that's
what
not
happened."
Yeah. But again, it's the thing as well, and you've sort of mentioned it as well, is that it's not that contract; it's the totality of the contracts at the end of Doug's time. It's the Martin Jones contract alongside the Brent Burns contract, alongside the Vlasic contract, alongside giving Kachua his contract, alongside all of those deals. Were the ones you put them all together, and that's where we've sort of had to disentangle, and that's why we've, my big complaint about the hurdle one was that the amount of retention, the fact we were always going to have to retain, that's why I wanted a little bit more, because we've got another year's worth before we get the Burns retention off the books, so we can't retain anymore, so we're stuck until a little bit more, and we've still got a few more years of the Jones buyout to come out as well. That's Martin Jones is going to get paid by so many teams to not play hockey. It's
no doubt.
Unbelievable how many teams are not going to pay Martin Jones to play for them. So let's talk one of my special subjects, which is Quinn. So I've been, and you very well know this, Dan, because I beat this drum to you on Twitter. After almost every game. Surely we're done with this, but I understand why we're not. But I really want to be done with this. Convince me I can survive one more year of this.
I mean, it's hard, right? Because here's the thing with David Quinn. I know people get mad at me because I don't have like a harder take on this, but like the Sharks have fired a lot of coaches in the last little bit. And I think that like my take has always been like, you don't want to be Buffalo where you're constantly, changing the top and trying to like reset things every couple of years. Because I think that can be just as bad for a rebuild as having a bad coach for too long. David Quinn has a contract that expires next year. I think that if the Sharks are playing embarrassing hockey like they have for large stretches of this season, I think it's very hard to justify bringing him back at that point. But I think right now, this team isn't even on the come up yet. This team is, I don't know if we've found the bottom yet. That's my concern. And if that's the case, then you don't want to fire David Quinn and promote Ryan Warsofsky, because then you have a coach who's not going to survive the rebuild. A better coach who's not going to survive the rebuild.
Yeah, you want Quinn to throw himself on the grenade.
Pretty much, yeah. Like I don't think Quinn's going to be the guy when this is over, but I don't know if you're going to do better right now. Like I just think given what the Sharks have had to work with, roster wise, injury wise, like I don't know any coach that would have done better. There are some things in the Sharks games, X's and O's wise, that I do have concerns about, and those are definitely coaching issues, but I don't know if those are strong enough for me to be strongly advocating for his firing at this point.
I just want to point out, like you mentioned Buffalo, Ian. Like recently, Buffalo literally just fired their head coach.
They just fired the mafia boss that was their coach. So, like, Don Granato, come on, what a name! But yeah, like they've literally just fired their coach again.
Yeah, so like case in point.
and like that Buffalo roster is not a bad roster at all. It's got a lot of positives to it.
Brutal.
But yeah,
division.
I think that's the brutal division for a start, but also the inconsistency of don't quite know. Look, we'll talk when we briefly talk playoffs before the end of this as well. Like as much as there's been missteps here and there for some of those coaches.
Big missteps. Like you traded the guy, you poisoned the well and traded the guy that you were supposed to build the team around in Jack Eichel.
Yep, exactly.
Right. Like that's why it's like they
Send
can get
back surgery and you're fine. Send him. Let him go.
Like you can get Macklin Celebrini, but if you can't build a team around him, and you know what I mean, and if you can't make that work and you trade him, then what is it all for?
I mean that was an organizational thing too. I mean, remember the tantrum they threw when they didn't get the first overall pick.
Sure.
And like the strop of getting Jack Eichel, and everyone's like, "Are you okay?"
Like, Jack Eichel, right? Like,
and as we've seen when he's gone to Vegas and is healthy, he's really good at hockey. It turns out
he was my vote for Conn Smythe last year, for Conn Smythe winner. I know, and Marchessault deserved to win it too. Like he was definitely neck and neck with Jack Eichel, but I think Jack Eichel made a really strong case for Conn Smythe last year.
I thought Eichel probably should have. I would have been happy if Eichel had got it, and it would have been a great story.
That was my vote, but I mean, I don't hate Marchessault getting it. I think that it was also a fine choice.
Yeah, but in terms of just that sort of consistency, I understand that. The other thing too there, and again, I've talked about Wasowski for a while, and I've maintained they hired him as the coach and put David Quinn in front of him so he could learn from an NHL coach, possibly 100%. What not to do. But I'm also interested to see what this looks like in terms of going forward. If they fire Quinn, like, does he get stained with the Quinn staff thing, or are they going, no, we've got you in a box, you are the guy?
I think he's such a, like, Warren Rosofsky he's one of those guys that whenever there's like a job that opens up, like, and you're looking for guys that haven't been in the carousel, like, he's always a name that gets brought up. I don't think the Sharks would allow him to interview for any of these head coaching positions that are coming up. But
he's taken that role that Sheldon Keefe had before the Leafs fired Babcock.
Correct. Yep.
Where it was like always, Sheldon Keefe's the next guy up, and then a team started talking around him, which is what prompted them to move on Babcock finally.
100%.
Like, if we don't, that's the other thing I was going to mention, because we've talked a little bit before we started as well about the Barracuda.
Mm-hmm.
The Barracuda needs anything, probably behind the bench.
Yeah, I watch the Barracuda a lot. Barracuda is one of the things that I do at Teal Town USA, is I cover the Barracuda. Again, I do want to say that, like, the coaching for the Barracuda isn't great. I would move on from John McCarthy, but I think you have to say in that same sentence that the injury problems on the Sharks also plagued the Barracuda, who had injury problems of their own. They lost like some of the veteran pieces of guys that you would hope would be the guys to kind of help lead the charge there and take pressure off of the kids that are there, because you still need the veteran guys in the AHL, right? Like you don't want to, at any level, you don't want to just be all the kids. You need those veteran guys to kind of fill it out, and they lost those guys right away. Justin Bailey gets a contract on San Jose, never goes back. Ryan Carpenter comes up, never goes back. And then obviously various call-ups through the year that further depleted their roster, and then injuries and everything else. Now, that being said, this is a team that I think gave up the most shorthanded goals this year. This is a team that could not win in overtime. Like there's other problems with the Barracuda that I think are alarming at this rate. My concern with the Sharks always is that, and people always get mad, and they're like, Ian, they just build them a building. And I'm like, yes, that's good. That's true. But I feel like anytime the Sharks want to pinch pennies, that is where the pennies get pinched. And that's my concern with the Barracuda.
Yeah, I think that's a deep concern in terms of, so where do you look for development? My other thought there is, and again, it's a move that would never happen. But do you look at Ryan Wasowski and go, hey, take the Barracuda for 12 months? I look at that as a way for him, first of all, to be in the chair.
I think if you were going to fire David Quinn, that's a move you might make, right? You might say, okay, look, you're going to coach the Barracuda. We're going to keep you on the payroll. We're going to put you in the Barracuda, and we're going to bring in another tin can who's going to take a bunch of losses before you come up. But I don't know at that point, like, you don't want to poison the well there either, though. Like, you don't want to be like, oh, well, you're going to go coach the Barracuda, and then, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think as long as they don't make him take a pay cut to do it, I guess. But everyone wants to be in the NHL. Coaches, players, the NHL is where you want to be.
I think internally he knows it's his chair. He knows it's his chair.
I think so. I think it is, yeah.
And that's why my only rationale behind that, and I agree, I don't think it would happen, but my only rationale behind that is, as well, it gives him a chance to start working with some of those developing players.
It's a great point. Like it's
a call.
It's a great point. 100%. Like I understand your logic, and it makes a ton of sense to me. I just don't know if it's practical.
Yeah. In-house solution to a problem that they're never going to solve that way. But, it's for me, it's just a way of looking at it. In terms of the Barracuda, they've been a bit of a disaster. But then again, what hasn't been? But then again, what hasn't been, to be honest? It's kind of really hard to go, but this has been, no, that's not been great. But
it's unfortunate because, like, obviously, like, when the team is bad, you're kind of hoping your AHL team will kind of balance that out, and you could kind of watch, but like, it's rough because the Barracuda, I think I don't know where exactly they are in the standings. They're very near the bottom, if they're not the bottom of the standings. And it's hard to watch both teams be in that situation, and both teams play spells of just embarrassing hockey.
So for either one of you, just to start with this, how much do you think that the plan is largely revolving around a ping pong ball? Because there was as I said before, there was a large part of me for a while that feels like the entire San Jose strategy involves Bill Daly turning over a card that says the first pick overall is San Jose.
Go ahead, Felix.
I think you gotta. Sorry for me to answer this question, because I'm like, because I'm thinking, does your strategy, how much does your strategy really change if you don't get the first football pick, right? Like, because whether or not you get Macklin Celebrini, you have to have that support around your superstar player, right? You have to have that support to get you wins, to get you competitive hockey. And I mean, just look at Edmonton, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, they're doing a lot of the work, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and so
when we talk playoffs, I'll explain why I never picked the Oilers to win the cup.
Yeah,
largely that.
But just to finish my point, I think regardless of whether or not you're getting that first overall pick, I think your strategy has to be like, build as good of a support around whoever you're building around as possible. So
the latest online one that I've seen, which I find hilarious, is the number of people that are like, okay, San Jose doesn't get it. but the Penguins do, which means we do, because they can only jump up to fourth.
To fourth, but then they probably keep their pick, and that'd be bad.
But then that also means that we get their pick next year instead. And that was
right.
The theory that they're like, well, that draft's deeper. And I'm like, you take your pick when you get your pick, because the Penguins are not going to sit there and necessarily be rubbish for another year.
I think that the Sharks need the guy, right? And I like Will Smith, but I don't think Will Smith is the guy. I think he's going to be a very, like, I think he could be the Leon Draisaitl to Connor McDavid, to use that analogy? Sure, 100%, but you still need Connor McDavid. Now, Macklin Celebrini is not Connor McDavid. He is not Connor Bedard, but he is really, really good. And the one thing that I always caution people about is, like, they're always like, oh, but we missed out on the generational player. That's true. You did. And that sucks. But, like, there's a lot of guys in the league that are really good that aren't generational. Like, oh, I didn't get Connor McDavid, but I ended up with Nathan McKinnon instead.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, what a horrible pain that is. Like, how awful. You know what I mean?
You know, we all remember the ridiculous debate around Matthews versus Laine. And, you know, well, maybe Patrick Laine could go number one. Now, at the time I was going, no. But that's been proven out that Austin Matthews is that guy, and that's what you need.
Absolutely, the guy.
He's my favorite. He's my favorite player to watch in the league by a mile. I absolutely love watching Matthews play.
Yeah, like so, like if you don't get the generational guy, but like there's a lot of really, really good elite players in the league that have done more than the generational guys. Like Connor McDavid still doesn't have a cup. Like Sidney Crosby has 3.
Yeah.
So good for him. But like, there's a lot of guys who, you know what I mean, have gone on to win cups that are being really,
very,
really
very
good.
good. Yeah, they're very, very good. And especially if you're San Jose and you look up and down that roster at the moment, we'll take very, very good.
Yeah,
I'm happy to take very, very
good at this point.
Yeah, I'll take decent. I'll take serviceable. Serviceable? Can we have serviceable? Thank you. Especially maybe in the defense.
So I think if they don't get Macklin Celebrini, I think that hurts, because I think you're still looking for the guy at that point. I think the thing that worries me about the Sharks is that you don't ever get, like, the lottery never really helps you.
No.
And then you end up in a situation like Detroit. Now, Detroit's a good team and Detroit's on the come up, but they don't have that. I mean, you could make an argument Lucas Raymond is really good.
Yes.
But you know, if they win, they get better luck in the draft lottery, like the COVID year where they got absolutely screwed. Like, you wonder where they are then, right? You can definitely get out of it with not getting the guy, quote unquote, and just having a bunch of really good guys. I just think it's easier when you have the guy.
Oh, significantly. It's a nice little kickstart. You know, it's like, I'm really interested to see as well, just on off season. We didn't talk about any possible trades of people as well. And I think Yep.
I was gonna say, like, for me, like, I think, like, getting Celebrini would be nice. Like, but I guess I'm sort of thinking on more of like a, like, if this, because it's still a lottery, and like there's always a chance that you're not going to be able to get, you know, the prize possession, and it's just like you kind of still need a contingency plan around that. And so, like, sure, you know,
And look, our scouting, the scouting of young players has been decent. Like, the way they've actually worked recently has been very good, as we've seen with things like, you know, being able to go out and recruit players like Colin Graf, for example.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the Sharks, like, drafting under my career, like, again, it's too soon to really say, but I kind of like the direction they've gone in a lot of places.
The identification of talent has seemed to be a lot more focused.
Yeah.
Not so much of a, well, we're just going to throw this at the wall and see what sticks. You know, Henry Thrun was a deliberate, they set out to get him. They set out to go and get Colin Graf.
Yep.
There was a plan. You know, that seems to be a lot better. I'm also wondering, and I mentioned this too, I think I mentioned this too the other day, I put it up somewhere. Can we convince one of the teams that doesn't watch a lot of San Jose hockey that Mario Ferraro is their defensive solution?
Never say never. I love, like, it's so sad because, man, I was so in love with Mario Ferraro when he first came in the league. But, like, my take on Mario Ferraro is now is, like, I think the engine works. Like, I think the guy works his ass off, right? Yeah. He busts his ass. He blocks shots like crazy. He does a lot of things that you want from a defenseman. My problem with Mario Ferraro is the hockey sense isn't really there, in my opinion, right? Like, I think the motor runs, but there's no one behind the wheel.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah, it's the best one I can come up with for him, right? And it sucks because I love Mario Ferraro, man, but
And not to mention off the ice, he's got his, we all know he's got his YouTube channel and he's
Sure,
just
yeah.
super like chill and everything. But
Yeah.
I agree.
It's the hardest thing, right? Because like I know I go after players like really hard sometimes, but it's like I don't think that they're bad people.
No, he's another guy. Like that's the thing. I like Mario Ferraro.
Yeah.
But if you've got teams like it happened as we got closer to the deadline, there were a lot of conversations around, teams looking at Ferraro as a depth defenseman because they're looking for value pickups. And I think we benefit a lot. And again, you'd have a bit more of an idea about this. And I think we benefit a little bit from we suffer from it, but we benefit occasionally from the fact that people in the Canadian market don't pay any attention to San Jose whatsoever. And something happens in San Jose.
People don't pay attention to any hockey that happens that doesn't start before 7 p.m. Eastern.
No, exactly. if Ron McLean hasn't introduced it to you, what's the point? But it just feels, again, I've always taken in a bunch of hockey media from a wide variety of sources and finding things on the Sharks. And my favorite game to play was always with, for example, the Dangle podcast was wait for Adam Wilde to talk about San Jose because he doesn't know a thing about them.
Yeah.
And he just starts talking garbage.
There's been a lot of that this year.
Oh, yeah, there has. Yeah, there definitely that's been a theme this year. And there's a lot of, this is what's happening in San Jose, followed by, no, it's not. Their prediction at the start of the year was the Ducks would be last and the San Jose might push for a playoff spot. And I'm like, have you paid any attention? We're terrible. We're absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
I will say the one silver lining, and I granted this is a low bar, but at least they're talking about the Sharks.
That's true.
It's better than, again, I listen to, a wide range of media. I haven't heard the Sharks mentioned on TSN ever. And 32 Thoughts, no, nothing there. It's very difficult to find any mention of the Sharks in any media that's not Sharks based. And that's, it's kind of
it's hard too because like there wasn't unless you're trading Tomas Hertl, right? Like there hasn't been a lot to talk about this team unless you just want to like drag them out and kick them for like, oh, they just got blown out 20 goals in 2 games, and there hasn't been
they talked about is when we got blown out. Then they talked about is when we beat Edmonton, but not because of us, because we beat Edmonton.
Correct.
And again, for me. And I put this in the thing last night when you were talking about it in the post-game show. It's like your moment of the season. It was beating the Oilers because that was just funny.
Yeah, it was.
So funny. And it got a coach fired. And it made
for Jay Woodcroft.
I feel bad for him because he's, again, a lovely, lovely, lovely guy by all accounts. But it was so funny to watch that team just go, well, we can't lose to the Sharks. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, they did lose a couple more games before they fired Woodcroft, but that was definitely where the.
By the way, I should clarify and say we obviously we love Dingle, but
we do, we do, and I know you and I are both on the both.
In case they somehow come across this podcast,
you're a mod, we know, and again, I do love them, and I've frequently said I do want to get Steve on here at some point. That's been my long held goal is to get Steve on here at some point. But yeah, it's I just always find it funny because Adam just doesn't know anything about teams that aren't necessarily Toronto. And that's very funny to me. In terms of just quickly before we get into like Arizona, which we're going to come to, and then quickly into the playoffs, just the Pacific as a whole, because it's been such a weird one. Like you've had the Canucks have discovered PDO benders and ridiculously high shooting percentages that didn't drop. It's going to come.
They regressed to the mean a little bit as the season ended.
They regressed, but they're still the highest in the league. Yeah. Still the highest in the league. Interestingly enough, the 2 highest shooting percentages in the league, Vancouver and Tampa.
So I wouldn't have guessed Tampa.
No, I wouldn't have guessed Tampa either. And Tampa took 80 more shots. But they've got the exact same shooting percentage. So Tampa actually had more shots, but I wouldn't have picked that until I looked at the stats. But the Pacific it also got to a point where no one wanted to win it. And
it really did.
And then no one wanted to work out who was getting the 3rd spot versus the wild card spot. And I thought the Kings made a choice. And I thought Vegas made a choice, more importantly. It felt very much like Vegas made a decision. I don't know why they made that decision because I think Dallas might do them. But what do you reckon about the way the Pacific shook out? It was a bit helped by the fact that Edmonton started so bad.
So bad, right? Like I think Edmonton was so bad because the goaltending in Edmonton to start the season, and even now isn't that
It's
great.
not good.
It's not good, right? And I think you want to see coaches get fired. Have a goalie who's not playing up.
If I recall correctly, McDavid was not 100%.
That was also
no,
true.
he wasn't.
Pacific's a weird place because you have a good mix of teams that are on the come up, on the way down, or just kind of treading water a little bit. I think like the Flames are finally kind of accepting their reality, so they're going to be starting to come down. Seattle's on the come up, I think, but they were, you want to talk about PDO merchants and guys shooting way too high. That was their season last year, right? Yeah. Vancouver has all the pieces to be good, so they're not being good last year kind of surprised me because they have all the pieces. This team should be a team that is contending to win the Pacific every year for the next 5 years, 6 years.
Vancouver's the team probably outside of the Rangers. Vancouver's the team that I look at and go, they will go as far in the playoffs as their goalie that takes them.
100%. Vegas is Vegas.
Yeah.
Like
you can't say really anything about Vegas apart from they're
Vegas. Like they somehow always find a way, and they're a team that scares me in the playoffs because they're a team that just all those guys have been there, done that. Now now a lot of those guys have rings. They're a team. They're a really well built team. It's a team that's way over the salary cap when everyone's healthy. But that's the rules, right? Like you can get mad at it, and it's a little bit icky, but they've managed the salary cap like wizards, and the next CBA is going to be fascinating to see how the rest of the league responds to what Vegas has been able to do.
And the other important thing is they keep on. Everyone talks about they're rorting the system, and Stone's been genuinely injured. Like that's not. He happens to have time to come back.
A lacerated spleen is a serious injury.
Genuinely injured. Like they've got him back for the playoffs. And I go, look, he's back in time for because he sat the rest of the season out because he had a lacerated spleen.
He's still not taking contact. Like
he's not gonna be probably vaguely up to speed.
I would be if he can play game one, I will be super shocked because I still think that like he might be practicing right now, and I think it's a lot of there's a lot of gamesmanship when you get into the playoffs and stuff, right? Like Remember when the Sharks were playing, what was it, Edmonton, and Joe Thornton, like they, the series, the second that series was over, like he had to go and like have like super surgery, but he was like skating before every game just because like, Thornton might play this game, and like
was that the series where he basically like had like a floating knee? So like his
that was the season where at the end of it, and everyone does when they go to the locker rooms afterwards, they're like, I was playing with this, I was playing with that. And Joe Thornton
Joe Thornton goes and has like major surgery after the playoffs are over, but before that, like he's skating, he might play. Like I feel like that's what Vegas is doing with Mark Stone, and again, I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, so be it. But like,
but that's the thing. They do it well, and if you're going to do it well. They're built like an NBA franchise builds a team rather than like an NHL franchise builds a team.
Yeah, they're smart. Like I hate Vegas. I hate them for all their dumb stuff. But like you have to hand it to them. They've figured it out.
No, one of my favorite hockey memories remains the Vegas collapse against San Jose.
100%. Yeah, great.
That is one of my favorite hockey memories of all time, and I've always complained on
that. Was like the last hurrah, man.
I've always complained on the podcast that Vegas's problem for me was they rolled like an egg in their construction. They sort of never quite built properly. They had all these bits, but they didn't fit. And what they got right by the end of last year was they worked out how the pieces fit. Largely, Jack Eichel. Was the move that went, okay, now this all makes a bit more sense. Like when they got Petrangelo for it, that didn't make sense in the way it was built.
they're not like they're loyal to a point, but they're not like if you don't suddenly fit there anymore, like Jonathan Marshall, I don't think there's gonna be any money left for him.
Yeah,
And he's gonna be gone. Like they've let fan favorite guys go. They let Marc-Andre Fleury go.
Yep. And
and that was ruthless as hell. Like it sucks because like you want to like invest obviously in the players. I think investing in the players is a part of what makes being a fan so great. But like that team puts winning ahead of everything.
And that's been that's been the thing, is that I think there's a bit of it's that old hockey, new hockey mentality clash that you get. And you hear people go, well, there's no loyalty in Vegas, and players don't want to go there because there's no loyalty in Vegas. And Brian Burke was the big one who talked about all the time. Well, there's no loyalty in Vegas. Who's going to want to go there? There's just no loyalty. And you're like,
anyone who wants to win a cup.
Right. Would you like your cup? Because if you'd like your cup, go win.
Right. You gotta take some hits to get to where you want to go, basically.
So let's get into Arizona.
Okay.
Here we go.
So obviously Arizona they're dormant.
They're dormant, yes.
Not a phrase that I ever thought I'd be using in the NHL, but there we are. They're dormant. We saw a wonderful press conference today. Alex Murillo spoke to the media after, as Craig Morgan of PHNX said, he spoke to him on the first day he arrived in town and never again. And many requests, no conversation. They sent out Gutierrez instead to talk to people. Murillo spoke today, and I think we got a bit of an understanding why Alex Murillo doesn't speak. Because that was one hell of an entertaining train wreck of a press conference. It's very rare you get to watch the puppeteer working the puppet sitting next to them.
That's such a great way to put it, dude. That's not wrong. That's
how he looked. It looked like he had the hand up the back of the shirt and was like working Alex Murillo like a puppet. And
like, I've never seen such a clown show so well, like perpetuated, or whatever word you want to use.
It was amazing. We even got a Gary Bettman what he meant to say moment, which was brilliant. And that was when Murillo said, "I hate the press," and it's like, "I don't like the press," and everyone went. And you saw Gary tense. And if you watch the press conference back, we were talking about it before. If you watch the press conference back, I recommend watching Gary Bettman. Don't watch Alex Murillo. Watch Gary Bettman, because he keeps wanting to speak and he's moving his hands like he's saying words while he's sitting there, because he's trying to get attention to stop Murillo from speaking. And he does I don't like the press. And he finishes the sentence. And Gary looks and smiles and goes, I think what he meant to say was that he doesn't like the limelight. And he's like, yes, that's what I meant. I don't really talk a lot. I don't like, it's like.
So there was a you and I were watching the PHNX pod reaction of the press conference, and there was a moment where I didn't watch the entire press conference, but I saw clips, and there was a clip that they had shown where, I forget what Murillo was saying, but like Gary Bettman was basically tapping him on the arm or something, and then I honestly lost it, because I was like, oh my god, because if there was ever an example of like, holy shit, like this is just an absolute like fucking, like that was it. And then it's funny because like Liam Merrill, the host of the show, literally jokingly did that to Steve Peters, and it was hilarious. I was just like, holy shit, this is the owner of the Arizona Coyotes.
And he's pre-approved. He's a pre-approved owner. They have no issue. So what was really interesting for me in the press conference, before we get into more about Murillo and how bad that looked, the interesting part for me was, I've had a theory all the way along that Murillo was planning to get the rights so he could flip them, or he could buy the land at the auction, build his shopping precinct that he wants, sell the rights to make more money back to pay for the shopping precinct to another group, and he walks away with even more money. Now, what Gary Bettman did stress today is that he can't flip the rights.
Correct.
If he builds the rink and he's got to give them a year and a half's notice. So it's got to be a year and a half. He's got 5 years to do it.
Yeah, so like 3.5 to have
Yep.
the arena built.
Build the arena, and if he builds the arena, then it's reactivated. And I thought, well, what about other ownership? And the answer is he can only sell up to 20%, and he has to maintain the ownership for 5 more years after that.
Yeah.
So they're locked in on Alex Morello keeping this franchise.
As long as he does what they set out for him to do, right? Here's the thing with Alex Morello, and the thing that everyone has to remember is that Alex Morello had the rights. Like, it's his team. Like, Gary Bettman can be like, this is what we want you to do. But if Alex Morello didn't want to do it, he could have taken the NHL to court and tied this thing up for years in just litigation while they rot in Mullet Arena. And I will say this: thing I wish I could have been able to do was to go watch a hockey game, which I think it would have been cool as hell. So they had to obviously. The thing that people have to remember is they have to do this in a way that makes him happy, so that they're not going to court, that they're not going to have to battle this out legally. So they basically given Alex Morello a ton of rope, and now we're going to watch and see if he hangs himself with it.
I think he will. I
think so too. I think that I said this on the show last night, but like he is a guy that all he knows how to do is cash checks, whether it be revenue sharing checks or a $1 billion check for the Coyotes that he's getting from the NHL. That's all he's ever really done, right? It seems like anytime he's had to pay money, although he vehemently denies that, no bills were left unpaid, but there's so much smoke around those stories that there has to be some fire somewhere.
And it's also interesting too, because like the other thing that came out in the lead up to the Utah announcement was that at the time, Marty Walsh and the PA were pushing hard for Utah, which was really interesting. Like Marty Walsh came straight out when all that stuff happened when they lost Tempe.
Right.
Marty Walsh's statement wasn't just they need to sort it out. Marty Walsh's statement was Utah's there, and we need to look at Utah because this ownership group's there. And look, I have no doubt that Utah will be a success, because the one thing that has happened in Arizona is they've done a good job of getting, picks. That's another team that was bad and got no draft lottery luck for a very long time.
Yeah.
But now they've got the picks, they've got the prospects, they've built them into something. Now Utah's in a position where that ownership group wants instant success. They are going to spend money in free agency.
100%.
It wouldn't surprise me if, for example, I think the number one name free agent out there that's very interesting at the moment is Stamkos. And it wouldn't surprise me if Utah go, how much?
Red Wing.
What would you like? To try to kickstart all of that. That could be very interesting for all of that. So I think it'll work. I feel horrible for the way it's happened.
Yeah, that's the worst part of this, right? Like the NHL, the Coyotes fans, for what they endured. This is a Coyotes team that was, in some ownerships, like they just took on contracts that were basically paid by insurance. So they weren't actually paying players, and they were hitting the floor by just not LTIRing contracts.
That's a
Coyotes legend. Yeah. And then they finally get an owner in Morello, and I'll give him credit. Like, he brings in a GM. They start trying to build this team up, to try and build it to be something other than the league's money laundering scheme.
Yeah.
And then it finally looks like it's super on the come up. You've got guys like Logan Cooley and Clayton Keller and, all these guys. And now they lose the team. Like, it's such an awful thing for Coyotes fans. Like they endured all this pain. And when the team's finally going to be good, they're going to watch it be good in Utah. It's like Quebec Nordiques fans losing their team and watching them win a Stanley Cup the next year. I don't think Utah's going to win the Stanley Cup next year, but this is like watching Quebec loses their team. Now, I will say, if the Quebec Nordiques are still the Quebec Nordiques, they don't get Patrick Roy.
No.
But still, same thing, right? You lost your team. They get Patrick Roy because that's a trade that can be made, because Montreal, no way they're trading with them.
They would never trade in Quebec.
And then they win a Stanley Cup their first year in Colorado. And I don't think that's going to be what's for Utah, but this is going to be a very good team that is on the come up, that's going to be very good. And all the pain that they endured is for nothing. Their team's gone.
And in my opinion, is there a fan base that has endured more hell and back than the Arizona Coyotes.
No, and I mean the thing is that, and I put this in the article thing that I wrote that I put up on Twitter yesterday, was a large amount of this problem was set when they moved to Glendale in the first place, because they moved the team out of the hub, and there were lots of fans from elsewhere going, "Oh, you got to travel to watch your team, you fair weathered fans." It's a 90-minute each way trip.
Yeah.
On a weeknight, and there's no, there's no public transport links, and from what I understand, there's a ring road that's impossible, makes access to Glendale impossible. And you weren't traveling to Glendale to go and watch a game in midweek. It just wasn't happening. And then they go, well, why weren't the fans there? Well, you moved away from them. And they weren't
100%. Yeah. Like Glendale, I mean, the one thing I will say with Glendale, at least it was an NHL-sized arena, and it was built for hockey.
Oh, and look, the thing they kept pushing at the press conference hard was this was largely because they were going to be stuck in mullet. And that was the thing they kept pushing. Gary just basically kept on saying they can't play out of mullet anymore.
Well, that's it, right? Because like a lot of people like, oh, well, the Coyotes are so successful in mullet arena. It's so successful. And like Gary Bettman had to come out and say, yeah, but he's bleeding money. And then on PHNX today, they were saying like that the money they were bleeding is up like around 60. They might lost $60 million this year.
It's huge money. That's why the whole Tempe thing was stupid, because they could have had Tempe and they screwed that up.
They screwed that up. Yeah.
And that's Morello just not thinking. So before we finish up, let's just quickly talk about the playoffs.
Sure.
I've put down in my notes that it feels like you've either got Titanic clashes or walkovers. I sort of look at them and I'm like, there's either a really good tight Titanic battle between two teams that are fairly even, or I just think one side's going to absolutely rampage over the other one. I don't see many close ones. The one that I really want to talk about, because let's face it, Leafs equal traction. Leafs versus Bruins. Now, I actually think this is a better matchup for the Leafs, and my rationale behind that is simple. I think that Florida plays more like the Bruins than the Bruins do. The way they play now, Toronto has struggled traditionally with that Boston-style hockey.
Yeah.
I don't think Boston plays Boston playoff style hockey anymore as much as Florida plays Boston style hockey.
I think the thing with Toronto, I'm thinking in this series, I think is that like what it's the mental part of the game, right? Yeah. This is a team that has been this Toronto team. They have a really good team. Like I can't stress enough how good this Maple Leafs team is.
They're really good.
But you have to get over this hurdle. I worry about the mental part of the game, right? Because it's a team that has repeatedly had your numbers. But I also feel like if they can get past Boston, then watch out.
I struggle with my struggle with the Leafs is a little bit like my struggle with Edmonton, although not to the same extent, because Edmonton is a two-person team, and what we've seen traditionally, I know they've added some depth, but largely with Edmonton, the trick with Edmonton in the playoffs is you keep McDavid and Draisaitl penned in and on the ice for a very long amount of time, and the 5 minutes when they leave the ice is when you go score goals. And then they come back on and you pen them in again, and you rough them and you pen them in, you frustrate them and you exhaust them. Then they leave the ice and you go score. That's what you do. That's how you play Edmonton. With Toronto, it's a really sort of, I'm worried about the construction of this roster, because I think the pieces they added in the offseason were a little bit like they've built this team to please Canadian uncles.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Canadian uncles who mistake the idea of tough playoff hockey with we want to punch people in the face hockey.
Yep.
And I think there's a difference between playing heavy in the playoffs and sending Ryan Reeves out to punch somebody.
And I think Ryan Reeves is a guy. Sorry, Bill, let me cut you off. I'll let you. Ryan Reeves is a guy that I think he's only as effective as the opponent lets him be. Yeah. And Boston's not playing the Ryan Reeves game. Like if you go back to
what? Oh no, Ryan Reeves?
Right, yeah. Like if you go back, like if you want to talk about like Ryan Reeves when he was, just for something more context that we would have, like in the series where they came back and beat the Golden Knights, the Sharks did.
Yep.
When did that series turn? When Thornton and company stopped chasing Ryan Reeves around the ice.
Yep. And again, having a co-host who's a Penguins fan, will tell you straight up, when they traded for Reeves, I messaged him the moment that happened, and I've never seen him so disgusted with any of the And second that he left the Penguins was one of the happiest days, and they've won cups. And again, I just feel like they build Toronto's big problem, and I've always talked about it. They listen to the noise from the outside, and I don't just mean the fans. I mean they listen to the media and they run the team by the media. The media goes, "You need to go out and get some big heavy guys who can punch people in the face," and they go, "Great idea," and go and sign all the wrong guys, and then lather, rinse, and repeat. Now, if they win, I don't think it's going to be because of players like Reeves, etc. I think it's going to be because Austin Matthews scores 1 million goals. Mitch Marner remembers that he's Mitch Marner.
Yep.
John Tavares has a really solid anchoring role and giving some depth and giving some work to the players around the outside. Morgan Riley wakes up and has a much better time, and Samsonov and Wald decide that they can stop pucks.
That's the problem. Like you, and this is why I didn't take Toronto in this series, is because like if you look at goaltending specifically, advantage Boston, and it's
by a mile.
a landslide.
By a mile. I've got Toronto in this one in 6. I think they will win it, but I then think they'll get absolutely stomped into the ground by Florida again.
Yeah, I don't think they beat the Bruins. I think that just I can't go against Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark.
I don't know what he's
as opposed to Joseph Wall and Samsonov, who have had spurts of good, and maybe and look at goalies get hot all the time, and then a series completely changes. But it's a big ask.
Yeah. Sorry. So first off, I also have Boston over Toronto. I don't know what you had, Ian, but like I've got them Boston in 7. But like on the Ryan Reeves thing, I completely agree. So like so I mod the SDPN Discord, and there are, I don't know how many exactly, but I feel like there's a good enough amount of like Leafs fans who dislike Ryan Reeves, whether it's as a player or as a person, whatever. But like as a player, will say they dislike Ryan Reeves because it's like as you said, Ian, like you're getting essentially what you're getting is whatever Ryan Reeves can give, and it's not a whole heck of a lot, right? So,
it's not based on him; it's based on how the other team reacts to him.
Right, right. And it's just, and the whole thing is like, again, like we said, if you can like not pay attention to Ryan Reeves, and that's essentially it's game over, and it's just like it's sort of you're playing that mental game, and when you win that mental game, well, I mean, the rest.
Well, it also means that Toronto is playing short because you've nullified Reeves. Well, he's not out there to do anything else,
right?
So if that's not working, you nullify that whole thing, and that basically renders one line inactive, which cuts it back down. I think the other thing, just quickly, and we'll move on to quickly flick through the others. I think the other interesting part for me about this series, and I don't like bringing it down to one player, but I feel like this is a bit of a referendum on Mitch Marner's time in Toronto. I feel like if this series goes badly and they need to make the move, Marner's the move.
It's going to be fascinating to see, because it's such a rough place for Toronto to be in, right? Especially with Brad Treliving being a new GM there. Like, it's hard. I know Kyle Dubas worked hard because it's a good team, and like I think like the core of this team is good. I just think that sometimes you just need a better team.
Yeah, and remember, one of the things that hurt Dubas in the end was he said at the end of last year, "I'm open to listening to breaking the core up."
Yeah,
and that was it. That was the end, but
something has to give. Like if they lose in the first round again, something has to give.
Yeah, you've got to look for a way to move, and you can't move Tavares. No one's taking that contract. You don't move Austin Matthews. William Nylander, I think, is such good value still on that deal. I think he's still great value, and gives you what you need. Occasionally, you have to take shifts off. That's the only issue. I think Marner's the piece they can sacrifice, so I think that's where they go. Any other series, just before we sort of wrap it up? Are there any other series you're really intrigued by?
I think Dallas Vegas is the only one. I feel like you said, like there's a couple of teams where I think that there's just they're not even close. And then but I look at a team like Dallas and Vegas, where like Vegas has kind of been a lot of teams' kryptonite, Dallas included. And now they have to play in the first round. Dallas has a really good team, but like again, the thing in this series is I don't really trust either team's goaltending, to be completely honest with you.
It's the battle of DeBoer hockey.
It is, yeah.
Who's better at standing at that blue line, firing a puck on the net and tipping it? Who can do more of that? And I think they've got Joe Pavelski, so
Yeah, like it's. I'm looking forward to watching that series, and I think Winnipeg Calgary is going to be fascinating too, because I don't think that, or Colorado, sorry, not Calgary.
Yeah. I've got the Avs going all the way. I think the Avs are going.
Okay, yeah. So I like the Jets in this series. I think the Jets are a sleeping giant in the West.
I'm intrigued by how Hellebuck stands up in the playoffs. That'll be interesting. The other one that I've got that's a very weird one, I'll come back to you, Felix, and your one is don't instantly write Edmonton's name down. There are two teams that traditionally play Edmonton fairly well. The Kings, even though they've lost 2 in a row, they've played them really well in the playoffs. I think regardless of if it was Vegas or if it was the Kings, I don't think either matchup is one that Edmonton enjoys. And
I don't think so either.
And I think the Kings literally now have a absolutely nothing to lose mentality on this. And I think they understand the blueprint at least. Now, can they carry it out? That's the question mark.
It's another team where it's another team where you have to meet your, it's like Toronto playing Boston. It's Vegas playing Dallas, or Dallas playing Vegas, right? It's another team where it's like, this team has been your brick wall in the playoffs. Can you get over it? And I think the Kings are a team on the come up, and I don't think they're at their full power yet, but I think they're past the point now where they're just happy to be there. Like, at some point, this team has to win something.
Yeah, remember they got that first one of those series. They got so close to putting Edmonton out.
Yeah,
like it really, really tight. So, and even last year, but they played them well. It was, they didn't get there, but they played them well. Felix, are there any other series that you're looking at and going, that's an interesting one?
Honestly, I would echo the same. Like, essentially, Dallas, Vegas, and Winnipeg, Colorado. Like, I think Winnipeg, Colorado, to me, I think is especially going to be interesting because, like, obviously, we know Colorado's been there. Winnipeg is, as Ian said himself, a sleeping giant. So I think that's going to be a series that's going to be one to watch for sure. And yeah,
I mean, apart from the fact that I've got Colorado in my head winning everything.
Sure.
I kind of feel like whoever comes out of that Colorado Winnipeg series,
that's the team to watch.
That's the West.
Yeah.
The East is a bit more interesting. I think you've got Florida and Carolina and the Rangers, if they can. My big thing with the Rangers is, and my brother's a Rangers fan, and I've got a bit of a soft spot for the Rangers, always have. My thing is that, are we going to see Artemi Panarin in the playoffs? Because he goes missing. And I know he had a fantastic season again, but my big complaint last year in the playoffs was he scored that one goal and did absolutely nothing else for the rest of that series. And I'm interested to see if you get Panarin playing well for the Rangers. And
that's the key, because
can look like.
I think Panarin is a guy he's one of the rare wingers that can make your centerman better. Like, there's 2 guys in the league that really do that. I think maybe not as much anymore, but Patrick Kane was also one of those guys who I think, usually the center makes everyone else better, but like Panarin's one of the guys that kind of makes his line better, even on the wing. Yeah, I mean, I think the Rangers, you need him to go, because if they don't go, then I don't think that line goes as well as you would like. But it's fascinating. I mean, the Rangers, like, because of where they are in the bracket and how the NHL brackets work now, where everything's kind of just fixed seeding, they've got, in my opinion, the best goaltender in the league.
They do.
And Carolina is the team that they would meet in the next round. And Carolina's goalies are I like Carolina's goalies, but they're made of glass.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, with Freddie Anderson's on, he's great, but he's just likely to break in half.
Yeah, and he's gonna be great, but I feel like how many Carolina runs have been doomed by just horribly timed goaltender injuries.
Well, that was like last year. They just collapsed in a heap.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's going to be an interesting run. I think the first round's intriguing, but I think when we get to the semifinal matchups, I think you're going to have some very high-powered games, which will be good. you're not going to. I don't think you'll see one where you get a Cinderella team sneaks its way through, and I think they're likely to all bow out fairly early. I don't think I've got many major upsets. Again, the only one I'm thinking vaguely close to could be LA over Edmonton, but that's just also because I don't trust Edmonton, because I think the blueprint exists and you've just got to do it.
Very Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, look, I think Edmonton will be great the day that they can actually manage to have two separate lines, one with McDavid and one with Draisaitl. So you don't need to load all your good players onto one line. But that might do us for now, however. So thank you very much, both of you, for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's been an absolute delight to talk to both of you.
Yeah, this was great.
So just quickly, I know you've got stuff to plug, so plug away. Go for it. This is your space. Go for it.
You want to go first, Felix?
Sure. I guess so. I am at Felix Talks Puck. I occasionally tweet hockey on the X, Twitter, whatever the hell you want to call it. Yeah. So this is me. So
and you have the STBN Discord, which is
yes, I do mod that. So yeah. Ian, do you want to?
So I mean, you can find me at Ian Vlogs Hockey on Twitter. We both come from a group called Teal USA. We do a lot of different things, Sharks related. We have a post game podcast that we do after every game, and we have like just a silly streak of games that we've done for. I don't know what the number's up to now, but like we haven't missed a game, and I don't remember the last time we missed a game.
And managing to make really bad games worth it. So
yeah, sometimes that's the goal, right? We have another show that's going to be actually coming on a little bit later here called The Technologist. It's a weekly wrap-up show. I do a show on Teal Town USA called Teal Tinted Glasses, which generally focuses on the Barracuda. In the summer, it can kind of do a bunch of other things too. But yeah, it's definitely, if you're a Sharks fan and you're looking for Sharks content, we do a lot. We put out a lot of content every week. It'll obviously ease off a little bit now that we're in the off season, but I don't think we'll be as dark as we were. I think last summer we were all really burnt out and it was pretty dark as far as content, but I feel like we're going to have some content this summer.
Yeah, there's a lot of good fun. We do a lot of good fun content in the off season. Yeah. Last off season we did
thanks for having us though, Chris, because this was super fun.
Absolutely delightful. I think last off season we did a watch along to the offside, the Harold Ballard story, for example, and a bunch of other bits and pieces, and gave people, because we've got the benefit, and for people who may have come along because Teal Town, not because of us. This is the Extra Shift podcast, which is based out of the Australian NHL fans page, which is like 9,000 strong in that page as well, of hockey loving Australians, mostly. But we do every couple of weeks, we do myself and my co-host Brendan do a podcast, which is actually happening after this. This is my first one of the day. I've got another one coming up immediately following. We also do off-season stuff. We also do little recaps. We're available on YouTube. We're on Twitter. We're everywhere you want to be. We're like American Express used to be. So thank you very much, Ian. Thank you very much, Felix. Again, go and check out. Obviously, I'm pretty sure you're all checking them out anyway. And Teal Town USA, some of the best content out there, especially if you're a Sharks fan. And we will catch you all later.